Hello, everyone, and welcome to video 323 for the Legal Studies guy. This should be super quick today because it's the principles of justice, and hopefully, coming off area of study one, we are all well across them and won't need to devote too much time to them. Don't know who this quote's from, but it's a nice one. Progress has little to do with speed, but much to do with direction. And that's again all about making sure you've got goals. Like, what are we actually working towards? And in a way, if you can, writing those down. What do you actually want to get out of this subject? What do you want to get out of this year? And then, where do you want to be 3 years, 5 years down the track? So actually thinking about that direction you want to go in rather than just trying to do things quickly and constantly feeling like you're on that churn of what's next, what's next, what's next. Starting, cram, stack for sacks, things like that, where you lose sense of the overall picture. So it is worth taking that little bit of time now, particularly leading up to holidays, to really stop and think about what direction am I going in, where am I going, and what do I want to get out of these next few years. So, questions today look straightforward. What are the principles of justice? What are fairness, equality, and access in the context of this study? And how does our legal system, particularly our civil system, promote them? So, just building off what we did in criminal law, the definitions haven't changed. So, exactly the same definitions from criminal law, crossover into civil law. So they're there if you want to copy those down or need to look at them. But we'll go into each principle in a little bit more detail. And for each of these 3 pages, the definition will be here. And that's the definition out of the study design. So this is clearly what VCAR, who has set this study, want us to understand fairness to mean. And they've said fairness is all people can participate in the justice system and its processes should be impartial and open. So I would say that, again, our keywords here are impartial. So if we're looking for things that are fair and to illustrate that they're fair to an assessor, we're looking to point out things that lead to impartiality or things that help remove that bias and prejudice so we get an impartial outcome. And there's a little bit of that crossover with access around participation. How does a feature of our justice system help someone participate? Is both helping them engage with access, but it's also meeting that definition of fairness. Centrally, as we went over in criminal law, a decision that is fair, like the fair decision, is ultimately going to be the right decision. So fairness is actually about trying to get the correct outcome. If someone has been harmed, trying to make sure that we have a system that enables the evidence to be presented in a way, there are processes and procedures in place that enable that to be presented, assessed, and ultimately the right decision to be reached around whether that person deserves compensation or not. The right decision is the just decision. So that's really, really important. We want to make sure that as a result, we remove prejudice and bias wherever we can, because that is something that is likely to lead to a wrong decision or an unjust decision, a decision that might be made based off the personal characteristics of someone, their financial status, etc. So, we'll talk a lot again about costs in civil law. This is where, cost of legal representation comes in. Could someone maybe lose a matter based off the fact that they couldn't afford a lawyer and therefore couldn't present the information and evidence in the same way as, say, the defence or the defendant is able to? And as a result, the decision's made off that incomplete evidence, the way that person has presented themselves, and therefore a prejudice and a bias towards them, as opposed to the actual best case possible. So we ultimately know fairness is about coming to the correct decision, the just decision that is based off the evidence and facts and not other characteristics or features. Equality, as always, is the toughest of the 3 principles, and it has the longest definition, I think, because they're trying to make it less tough. And I would just keep our eyes down here. Engagement's mentioned, which crosses over with access a little bit as well. But I would keep our eyes down here around disparity and disadvantage. disparity and disadvantage. Equality is fundamentally about trying to make sure that neither party is at a disadvantage or any person. And in a civil matter, we're mostly going to talk about the parties. In criminal law, we would have included victims a little bit as well, as this in a way, not a party, but a key feature of a criminal trial is a victim. In civil law, someone who is a victim who has been wronged is going to be the plaintiff. So we're focused very much on the parties and trying to make sure that the parties are on level footing. So parties are treated in the same way without any disparity or disadvantage. And look, this is simply most of the time going to come down to processes and procedures, rules of evidence and procedure. I've still got some criminal law stuff in there, which is annoying. My apologies. Both parties, so the defendant and the plaintiff, should be treated in the same way. The processes and procedures should be applied to them in the same way. From trial to trial, the processes should be the same for all personal injury matters, all defamation matters, etc., etc. It's really important that there is equality across different trials, different civil disputes, but also equality for the parties within a dispute. So parties should be on the same footing, rules and procedures applied in the same way. If needed, adjustments can be made to ensure a party is not disadvantaged. And that might be particularly, say, self-represented litigants, so people who can't afford a lawyer. There are extra resources available for self-represented litigants around how they need to run their case, things they need to do. There are features of the court and even within a civil dispute where the judge might be able to provide a little bit more direction to them around the processes and procedures to help them navigate that, certainly not in terms of how they present their evidence and run their case. But there can be adjustments made to try and make sure that parties are on the same footing. Again, money will come into this a lot. Can you afford legal representation? Can both parties afford legal representation? What if one party can afford a larger, more comprehensive legal team than the other? How does that impact equality in the civil space? Is something that we'll definitely be exploring in a little bit more detail. And then finally, access. Our keywords with access are engage, an informed basis. So how does our civil justice system work to remove barriers that limit the participation of people, limit their engagement? So costs, time, language barriers, cultural issues, delays. How or what features of our justice system are trying to counteract these things? So, court hierarchy and the distribution of cases, all those sorts of things are there to try and help people engage more readily. Use of interpreters or the availability of interpreters, for example. If these barriers aren't addressed, then it's really, really hard for someone to initiate a claim, continue a claim, or defend a claim. And as a result, they don't have access to the justice system. Or even if they are able to initiate a claim and say they can't afford a lawyer, it's really, really hard for them to understand the processes and procedures. So even though they have a claim, they're still not engaging with the justice system in an informed way. And we know that that ultimately links back to fairness, in that it is likely to lead to unjust outcomes. Obviously, we're looking for how aspects of our justice system illustrate these principles of justice, and just, looking to answer questions like these ones. How does a process remove bias and prejudice? Thinking about, say, juries in a civil matter, 6 optional jurors, the directions from the judge, the fact they're a panel. These might be features that remove bias and prejudice. The fact the judge is a legal expert who is trained to apply the law in a fair and impartial way, that removes bias and prejudice. How is it ultimately going to lead to the right outcome? Lawyers presenting evidence is going to lead us to the outcome that's based on evidence and facts and arguments, not other notions. With equality, we're always looking at who is being treated the same, what process is the same from trial to trial, to illustrate that level playing field, illustrate that lack of disparity or disadvantage. And with access, How does it build engagement? Like, how does it help someone engage? How does it help someone understand what's happening so that informed basis? How does it remove those barriers of costs and delays? These are really, really important things that will help us prove or show where access exists in our justice system. Here are a few things that illustrate that. I won't talk through them too much or at all because we will go through them in future slides, particularly things around court hierarchy and legal representation. From here on, each dot point we look at, we're going to be focused on that idea, like with criminal law, of then how do each of these bits of knowledge we're learning help us achieve or not achieve fairness, equality, and access. So from here on, and as I've said previously in this video, going to focus really heavily on costs. In civil law, costs are just a huge factor that are going to impact on fairness, equality, and access, and a few things here that promote that as we go through. Ultimately, in the context of VCAR's definitions, in the context of the legal study design, I would hope that if someone spoke to you right now about what fairness, equality, and access means, you could give them a good definition. You could clearly look at what those key words are, or the key features of those definitions. And as a result, start looking at or start being able to show how our justice system promotes them. Feedback below. Happy studying.